Thank you, Senator Rhiannon. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President, and thank you, Senator Mason. I was just speaking to Senator Day from South Australia about a fellow state person, I suppose is the term, of his, Bert Kelly, who used to be the member for Wakefield for a long time, would be familiar to many of the people in this House, and along with his many other achievements and statements and successes over time, Bert Kelly also had an aphorism that when you heard a politician or a government announcing a new dam, you could smell an election just around the corner. Now, that was very true, perhaps, in Bert's time, but things have changed since that time. Things have changed greatly, and it's not the case now that you'd be able to time elections on the announcements of dams, because for the simple fact that we haven't built, or we certainly haven't announced the building of a major dam in most parts of this country for more than 20 years. There has been a few dams built in that time. The Burdekin Falls Dam is one in North Queensland, but they were generally announced a long time before that. Dams do take a long time to build. They take a long time to think through. They have a big impact on the environment, on communities, and they do need to be thought through. And so that's why governments need to show vision and need to show some foresight in getting behind these projects so that we can have a strong agricultural sector, so that our mining sector can have water, and so that our towns and communities, particularly in regional areas, can have access to affordable water too. And I just want to spend a bit of time tonight talking about the prospects for new dams in one part of our country, that is in central Queensland, in and around the Fitzroy Basin. The Fitzroy Basin should be more known to all Australians, but it's probably one that most wouldn't be familiar with. It is alone the biggest water catchment on our eastern seaboard. More water flows out of the Fitzroy River into the Pacific Ocean than any other river in this country. But most people wouldn't know that. The flows in that region of itself are about a fifth of the Murray-Darling. The Murray-Darling is a huge area which covers 4 states and the ACT right here. We sit in the Murray-Darling here tonight, and its flows are only 5 times larger than that of the Fitzroy Basin, which is a much smaller area. In the Murray-Darling, we've obviously developed that over many years, and we now have got the capacity to store around 70% of the flows of the Murray-Darling. So each year around 33,000 gigs flows out of the different areas of the Murray, mostly, of course, eventually finding their way down to the mouth in South Australia, but we can store around 80% of that flows. That gives us great security in this part of our country, because we can store water in the dry times to make sure we can grow food in particular. We store water in the wet times, of course, Mr Acting Deputy President, so that we can use that water in the dry times to grow food. And we need to do that in this nation because we have very variable water flows. The City of Melbourne can store enough water for 10 years. If it got no rain for 10 years and all its dams were filled, it could still supply itself with water. In London, they can only can store a couple of years, and that's because it rains a lot in England. They don't need that storage. And we need that storage here in this nation because of that variability. But in the Fitzroy Basin, we can only store around 30% of the flows of the Fitzroy Basin. It is an undeveloped resource, an untapped resource for our country. So a couple of weeks ago, when we were on a break from work down here, a few members of the LNP did a tour around the Fitzroy Basin. Myself, the member for Capricornia, Michelle Landry, the member for Flynn, Ken O'Dowd, we jumped in a plane and flew around some of the sites in this catchment. We also went to see the towns of Moranbah and Emerald to talk to those communities about what they wanted in terms of water storage. And I just want to briefly describe some of the potential opportunities. When you hear from other people that all the good dam sites in this nation are gone and all developed, that is rubbish, Mr Acting Deputy President. Some of the good sites have gone in some parts of our country, but there remain untapped areas on the frontiers of our nation where we can grow new food bowls. And we have one very good food bowl here in the Murray-Darling, but I think we need a second food bowl in our nation. I think we are big enough to have a second food bowl somewhere in our nation. I think the Fitzroy Basin could potentially be that place. There is a dam site on the Connors River, which is in the northern part of the Fitzroy catchment. It is a dam that could potentially store 375,000 megalitres, Mr Deputy President, a pretty big-sized dam, not the biggest, but a good-sized dam. It has already achieved state and federal approval for environmental purposes, so it's already gone through all the environmental assessment processes, and most of senators would be familiar with how onerous those are these days. It took years, but it's gone through those processes, so even the Greens should be supporting this particular dam. And that water could be used for some agriculture in the local area, but it'll also be very crucial for coal mining in the Galilee Basin. And coal mining needs water too. You need about 100, 200 litres for every tonne of coal you mine to wash that coal. And there are some big projects in the Galilee Basin going ahead. But because this dam is going to be used for that, I'm sure the Greens will oppose it. And they don't want to see those jobs in central Queensland, those 10,000 jobs that would be provided. But if we want those jobs, we need the dam. There's another site called the Nathan Dam, which is on the southern end of the Fitzroy Basin. It's a much bigger dam. It could potentially store almost 900,000 megalitres, quite a large dam. It hasn't got its environmental approvals yet, but they are hopeful, the Queensland Government's hopeful it will receive that next year. It's been held up for about 5 years because of a snail, because of a bogger moss snail that was discovered in 2008 or 9, I think, or a community of them on the site. They discovered 850 of them. And I don't have time to go into the whole saga, but we've since discovered 18,000 nearby. I don't understand how they missed the 18,000 snails on their first pass, but it's been held up for 5 years because of this environmental red tape. That comment has been made before, Senator Mason. It is indeed moving at a snail's pace. But you're absolutely right. But with the new one-stop shop, Senator Mason, that the government has implemented. We've signed an agreement with Queensland. Unfortunately, the Labor Party don't want to see dams built. They don't want to see a streamlined environmental approvals process. We haven't got the legislation through this place, but there should be some benefit through that one-stop shop that Minister Hunt has put in place. That dam will be used for agriculture, varies considerably, and very important for central Queensland, the cotton industry there around Emerald. It could really increase the efficiencies and scale of that industry. Two other sites that I want to mention tonight are Eden Ban and Rookwood. Eden Ban is already a weir, but we can expand that weir, and Rookwood would be a new weir. All up, they'd store around 200,000 megalitres, so pretty large, and they principally would be used for local agriculture in the Rockhampton region, horticulture largely, and also to supply Gladstone with water for its industrial needs, which are coming up to be pretty scarce at the moment. All in all, plenty of very good sites in this region, an untapped resource that I hope the government will now focus on. We've released a green paper, or the Minister for Agriculture, Barnaby Joyce, released a green paper last week where he says he wants to build dams. All of these sites are listed in those 27, and so I hope that we can see them come to fruition. And so do the people of Emerald and Moranbah. They want these dams to come to fruition as well. Number one, there'll be great construction projects to provide jobs in this region, jobs which are sorely needed given the slowdown in the mining sector and the coal mining sector in central Queensland. But more importantly, they'll provide reliable, consistent and affordable supplies of water for these towns and communities. In Moranbah, they rely on mining companies providing them water. It's not a very secure position for them to be in. And as I said, with these new mine developments, water is becoming scarce for those industries. And Emerald, while it won't benefit directly from these, well, its water won't benefit directly in water terms from these dams, it is at risk if we can't find new sources of water. These new mines will come to Fairburn Dam near Emerald and seek to take the water from there, and that will mean lower agricultural production in the Emerald region, will mean fewer jobs, and it will be not expanding agriculture or our food bowl, it will be detracting from it, and I don't want to see that. Now, we, I think, have outlined an agenda as a government to build dams. We need to try and see these come to fruition now. Dams are hard things for the private sector to do alone because they're very large projects which pay off over many years, and they're exposed to great regulatory risks from government, both around the quantity of water that's provided and the pricing of that water over time are all regulated by governments. And there does need the need there for the public sector to take some of those risks, to share those risks with the private sector, to ensure that these viable projects which are going to provide great community benefits in terms of jobs, in terms of food, in terms of better water security, go ahead.